So Jocko, thank you very much for joining us at Raw and Real here from Real Estate Dynamics. And really we wanted to get an understanding, everyone can look into what it is that you are and what you've done. But as far as going forward, if you had 3 things that you could share with people on that leadership side, that as your words, you can go get some, what would they be?
Well, I always say the most important characteristic for a leader to have is to be humble and stay humble, because if you're not humble, you aren't trying to improve yourself. You already think you're at the top of the mountain. And the minute you think you're at the top of the mountain means you stop training as hard, you stop preparing as much, and that's when you get caught. So you got to stay, you've just got to stay humble. Another thing from a leadership perspective is you got to stay balanced, right? You can be too much of a micromanager, and you can be too laissez-faire with your people. So you have to be careful that you stay in the middle of the road. You can be too aggressive and you can be too passive. You got to balance and stay in the middle. You can be too loud and you can be too quiet. So you got to stay somewhere in the middle. So that's another really important one. And then obviously the last one is ownership. You got to take extreme ownership. There's a reason why that's the name of the book. Is because that's the attitude, that's the common attitude that I see with leaders and teams that win. They take ownership. And when you take ownership of the problems get solved. If you don't take ownership of the problems, no one solves the problems. So when something goes wrong, you don't say, oh, it was your fault. No, I say, you know what, this was my fault and here's what I'm gonna do to fix it. Well,
I think you summed that up very well in Ramadi as far as when some of the things went wrong and then everyone else was sort of saying it was me, and you go, no, at the end of the day, I'm responsible for this.
And what's interesting about that is you notice in the book when I explained that situation, it wasn't like ownership was a foreign idea. We already were taking ownership as a troop and as a task unit. My guys, that's the attitude I always had. The reason that it stands out in that particular incident is because it was the most severe and catastrophic thing that I had ever imagined could happen and that I ever took ownership of. And that's why it became kind of
it was friendly fire, wasn't it?
Yes, it was friendly fire. So, horrible thing.
Now in that just then you talked about you need to get balance. What if you don't know what you don't know?
Well, that's the thing. You have to pay attention. You have to detach yourself a little bit and you need to look at what's going on around you to figure out if you're going too far in one direction or too far in the other. So if you're micromanaging, what you'll notice is your people stop taking initiative. So if your people just all of a sudden all they do is sit around and wait to be told what to do, then you're micromanaging them. On the other end of the spectrum, if your people are kind of floundering and they're not doing anything and they don't know which direction they're going or they're going in the wrong direction, that means you need to give them more guidance and more management. So that's why you got to learn to balance.
What's your biggest struggle currently still with yourself? With all the skills that you've got, all the experience you've got, all the gray hairs that you've got?
Yeah, I mean, as a leader, I'm always trying to improve. We could talk for hours about all the things that I do wrong and all the mistakes that I make and all the areas where I'm trying to get better. That's what I'm always trying to do.
The humble part, how did that come about? Like that, because I know you've even written about, you've got to have a self-confidence, but sometimes that can be a cockiness as opposed to a arrogance.
You got to be confident, right? If I'm a leader and I walk into a room and say, hey guys, I think this is what we should do, but I'm not really sure, well then people aren't going to be like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. No, they're going to say, well, I don't even know if this guy believes in his own plan. So you do have to be confident. So there's a balance there. It's not just being so humble that you're not confident. But what made me realize how important humility was seeing the SEALs that would get fired from leadership positions. The reason they would get fired wouldn't be because they didn't know how to shoot a gun. It wouldn't be because they weren't in good physical condition. It'd be because they lacked humility. And if you lack humility, you don't listen to anybody else, you can't improve, you don't respect your enemy. There's all kinds of problems that happen if you're not humble. And that's why I know it's the most important characteristic for a leader to have.
Leaving where you were as far as defense-wise and then coming into civilian space, has that been difficult? Because there was so much, apart from going out and being able to shoot people, you don't get any of that side of it, you don't get any of that leadership space. Now you're in a consulting space, so you sort of walk into places, express stuff and then leave. So do you see much of that?
Oh yeah, because we consult with companies for long periods of time, so we see where the improvement comes. And I mean, I own multiple businesses where, we still have to do what we do as leaders. So,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Cheers.